Good afternoon and welcome to the 2023 IHF Youth Coaches Education Week, where leading experts throughout the world of handball will share their knowledge and experience in 7 days. Today is a very special day. We have a double header. So apart from this webinar, we will have another one at 15 CEST, and you'll see that these two are quite interconnected. My name is Adrian Costeu. I'm a member of the IHF media team, and I will be your host throughout this week for all the webinars. And of course, we have translations available. These sessions are in English, but there are translations available in French, Spanish, and Arabic. It's quite easy to change to your preferred language. Then you will have to select the interpretation icon, the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom app, and then choose your preferred language. All these sessions fall under the umbrella of the IHF Education Center, and you can rewatch them whenever you want. They are available on demand at ihfeducation.ihf.info. So I will repeat once again, ihfeducation.ihf.info. For the first webinar today in the IHF Youth Coaches Education Week, we have a guest which will present a very interesting theme. We had guests from Slovenia and Norway in the first 2 days. Now we will see what happens in Germany with the long-term athlete development in this country. Dr. Patrick Luig is the lecturer today. Patrick, please, the floor is yours. You can start your presentation.
Thank you, Adrian. I quickly share my screen. So Adrian, just give me a very short hint if my screen is shared and viewable for everyone.
Yes, I think it's okay.
Perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear colleagues, wherever you are in front of your screens. Also welcome from my side. Thanks to Adrian for the short introduction. My name is Patrick Luig, and I am the National Coach for Education and Science at the German Handball Federation. Thanks so much for joining this webinar. I love to talk about this topic. It's so complex that we could easily fill a whole week just discussing about long-term athlete development. And my talk in the next, well, let's say 45 to 60 minutes will cover this topic, especially with a focus how we in the German Handball Federation are dealing with this very important process. So to give you just a brief overview of what you all can expect in this session, let's run briefly through the agenda. To start, I'd like to briefly address with you what is actually meant when we talk about long-term athlete development. And following that, we need to discuss what are key concepts of efficient long-term athlete development, and that needs to be understood first before I can say how we deal with this in Germany. And after this, let's say, more scientifically driven introduction, I will give you insights into the German perspective on the LTAD and present some ways how we handle the athletes' development pathways. And finally, I would like to conclude with some practical insights into our daily work. And we will use a very specific example of a single player to talk about his developmental steps and probably how to identify the next individual measures for him. And this will be the focus in this presentation. My focus will be on the physical training, but as Adrian already said, it's closely connected to the talk of Jochen Beppler, who will have a more technical and tactical view on this topic. So in the end, feel free to collect all your questions, throw in your questions, whatever you have, so that we in the end hopefully have a kind of a fruitful discussion on this very important topic. So what is long-term athlete development? Those who know me, and probably there are some, I love quotes. And I like to kick off a presentation usually with a matching quote. And this one I really like. This is from the Wall Street genius Warren Buffett, who said, "No matter how great the talents or efforts, some things just take time. You can't produce a baby in just 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant." So this quote is obviously not dedicated to long-term athlete development at all, but it highlights, for me personally, the most important part of the long-term athlete development, there is never no shortcut to becoming a great player. No matter how many coaches work on the build-up of a future handball national player, it will take time. And this is probably already the key message of this presentation. And we need to know long-term athlete development is not just a straight path upwards. There will be setbacks, times when development stagnates or when it progresses only slowly. Sometimes when it goes on quickly, and all in all, it will take time. So if we talk about long-term athlete development, then we need to say, what is long-term? Long-term in this case means that we are observing a process that typically takes longer than 6 years. And of course, there are for sure developmental milestones on every single stage of a process. But all the planning in the long-term athlete development process, all the periodization is focused on a long-term outcome. And the second point is the whole process is athlete-centered. I mean, handball is a team sport, and although it is a team sport, the long-term athlete development should clearly be an individual approach, as individual as possible, because every single athlete is unique. And there is much training interventions that will work with every athlete, of course, I know. But to get the most of it, you will need from time to time address the athlete very individually. And the better, the more often you do it, the better it is regarding the outcome. And finally, the long-term athlete development targets peak performance. And talking about handball, this means we are preparing for a peak performance age somewhat between 20 years and 30 years. So this is our target area where we are focusing when we talk about long-term athlete development. We are not preparing for winning an under-17 YAC tournament. Definitely not. So for us as YAC coaches, the biggest success is seeing our players on the big stage and not collecting titles or early victories. And this is tough for us coaches because our jobs basically depend on success. And so being a YAC coach is a responsible but also a very complex and difficult task. The IOC consensus statement says on the long-term athlete development or on the youth athletic development, developing healthy, capable, resilient and young athletes while attaining widespread, inclusive, sustainable and enjoyable participation and success for all levels of individual athletic achievements. Great words, which really cover what is meant with long-term athlete developments. Or we could say in very simple words, like we do, it's all about our athletes getting ready for an elite career and not preparing them for the next game or for next weekend. And if you do so, there's one good thing about it. The more you care for the long run, the more success you will probably experience as a coach and as a team and with your athletes during this process. But it's never the other way around. Focusing on success and thereby easily creating development for an athlete, that's not the way it works. So there are basically some key concepts that we need to understand first when it comes to long-term athlete development. And I'd like to talk and to share these three with you, which are, in my very personal opinion, the most important ones that we should know. And this is the concept of early specialization and late specialization sports. And then second, the difference between chronological age and biological age. And as a third very important concept, we need to know what peak height velocity is, because it is the most important metric that we have as coaches, as YAC coaches, during the growth process of athletes. So what about early specialization and late specialization? We need to understand that handball is and probably always will be a late specialization sport. And this is separating us from the example on the left side, gymnastics, for example. If you look at the peak performance age during Olympic Games, you can see the difference. The average age during Olympics for the gymnasts is 19.4 years, compared to handball, where we see an average of 27.7 years. So there's almost 8, 9, 10 years difference between the peak performance age in gymnasts and handball. And this must be considered in the build-up of our athletes. We do not need to be on peak performance level with 15, 16, and 17 years. We are later than other sports. This is very important. So what does early specialization mean in detail? We are talking here about sports where we have a high prediction of circumstances. Like in gymnastics, it's always a good example to understand. There's only the floor, it's up to you, and there is no opponent. So it's you and your technique, and it depends, the success, the performance depends mostly on you. And those sports tend to have to create perfection of specific techniques, or if we look at other sports, you need to maximize single physical capabilities. The good thing about early specialization is that it is often connected with earlier success. The earlier I specialize, the earlier, of course, I will be successful in this specialized area. But on the other hand, we do have a higher risk of losing our athletes through early specializations. Compared to that, handball or other sports, team sports, which are typically late specialization sports, are sports with highly changing circumstances. We don't know what is happening during the game, during the training. We have a referee, we have the opponent, of course, and all this will change my movements, and I need to adapt technique instead of to become perfect in technique. I need to adapt to the opponent. And in a complex sport like the team sports and handball are, it is not about a single physical capability that we are talking about, but it is multiple physical capabilities that need to be optimized. We need to be strong, we need to be quick, we need to be enduring. And it's not maximizing one of them, we need to deal with all of them. So late specialization, in contrast, is of course connected with long-term success, and good for us, it has a lower risk of dropout or losing younger athletes during that process. And this is very important, and probably important for all of you, that we in handball will always benefit from a diverse and variable sports activities in young ages. That does not directly mean that we should start late with handball, not at all. But it is good for our athletes that for a longer time of periods, our athletes should also participate in other sporting activities that may be helpful, that develop a broader set of technical or physical skills. And recent research even shows that our athletes that have a multi-sport background or career, so to say, they experience health benefits during their professional careers. So less health problems when you have a multi-sport background. So on the second important concept we need to talk about is the concept of relative age or biological age versus chronological age. Like you see here, chronological age is very, very simple. It's just measuring years. So although it's very easy to assess, it's not a good friend for us when planning training. When we are working with the young athletes, the reality is absolutely different. It's not like this. And this is where relative age, or so to say biological age, comes into our considerations. As you can see here on the right graph, we have the orange colored line, which is probably a very early maturing athlete. We have the normal developed athlete, and we have the late maturing athlete. And when we look at this, we see huge inter-individual variations in biological age. So sometimes at the same chronological age, we have a difference of 3 to 5 years. And this is why training with the YAC group can be like working with 14 different ages. And this needs to be considered. And not only in training, we need also to ask ourselves in our federations when the selection for the national team takes place, because typically we select during phases of adolescence. And still, and this is also still a problem in Germany and also in other countries, still we tend to prefer the early maturing over the late maturing, just because their performance right now at the point of time of selection is probably higher than the one of the late maturing one. So as you can see here on the picture, both have the same calendaric chronological age, but are obviously in a different biological age. So keep that in mind. And biological age is very much correlated to growth. And this leads me to the last concept I want to introduce to you. This is peak height velocity. Peak height velocity is the point or the period in the development where we see the maximum velocity of growth in stature in adolescence. And peak height velocity is so important because it's probably the easiest and thereby the best measure we have to cluster or separate our athletes into groups. Peak height velocity is a so-called growth spurt. So what we can see on average occurring at the age of 12 in girls or age 14 to 15 in boys. Of course, as I said, the variation is huge. We see the growth spurt in girls in a variation between the 10th and the 15 years, and in boys between 11 to 16 years. So as a YAC coach, if there is only one single metric on the planet I will measure, I will always go with height. Because when the growth spurts start from average 3 to 5 centimeters growth development during a year, they can jump to 8 to 10 centimeters. And these are sensitive phases, and we need to cluster our athletes accordingly. So monitoring growth in YAC athletes is, for me personally, is absolutely imperative for planning the training. And we can cluster easily the training group, which is probably of the same chronological age, into 3 groups: the group before, during, and after peak height velocity. And we know from science that depending on the phase they are actually in, they are more sensitive to a particular training. So it's up to us to adapt training according to growth, actually. This is a very overloading slide. I'm sorry for that, but I need to introduce it to you. This is the youth physical development model. I know all models are wrong, but some are helpful or useful. And this youth physical development model is definitely a very useful one. It considers all the 3 concepts I mentioned earlier. So for us in the German Handball Federation, this was, well, we were very much influenced by this model when we developed our own long-term athlete development concept. Just let me explain a few things for you so that you can easily understand what is in these 2 slides. First, we see on the left side the boys and on the right side the girls. What you can see here are different fonts. The bigger the font is, the more important is the quality that should be trained. And you see here that the concept of peak height velocity is incorporated. You see everything pre-peak height velocity, which is the lighter blue or the lighter pink. We have during peak height velocity, which is the darker blue and the darker pink, and we see the post-PHV phase, which then is no color again. And the very, very good thing, or the best news about this model, is that all skills, all physical capabilities can be trained at all stages of maturation. And this is somewhat in contrast to earlier concepts where we talked about open window theories. We can only train specific things during this time. This is not true, but there are certainly specific capabilities or physical qualities that can be addressed better during sensitive phases. What we see, especially for strength as a physical capability, is that strength can be trained throughout the whole development process. But the methodology we use when applying strength training will be changing over time. Whereas we have more neuronal adaptations in the early ages, we have a more physical adaptation, muscular adaptation, and hormonal adaptation in the years during the peak height velocity and after that. This is because of the hormones. So strength training is always applicable, but the methods will definitely change. What you also see here is the FMS. It's not the functional movement screen. It is the fundamental movement skills, which means general skills, not sport specific. And you can see here that we will have in the earlier ages a lot of benefits with general specific skills. And this leads me back, or brings me back, to the multi-sport education of our kids. And the more they develop, the more they come to the peak height velocity, the more specific the training needs. So this is all about this model. I need to show that because this influenced us very much when we prepared our long-time athlete development in Germany. So how does the German way look? The actual long-term athlete development model in the German Handball Federation is the so-called DHB Rahmentrainingskonzeption. It's a very ugly and long German word, I know. In English, it sounds better when you say it's the master plan for talent development in Germany. So comparable to international concepts, we differentiate 5 stages. The first one is the fundamental stage, where we have the focus on versatile and very playful movement skill acquisition, general skill acquisition, like you've seen in the youth development model, FMS, fundamental movement skills. Then we progress to the learn to train stage, where we have a very individual, general, and sport-specific skill acquisition, followed by the train to train phase, where the training becomes more systematic and the development of performance comes into the center. Then we have the phase of train to compete, where we specialize, also start to specialize regarding the position-specific techniques. And when finally we have the train to win phase, where we are preparing the peak performance. Again, please note here on the right side, the chronological age that is just a rough orientation for an ideal pathway of an athlete. This concept is basically linked to biological age and PHV, and of course, individual skill development. So the question finally is, of course, what is needed for peak performance? Because that's the long-term target we are heading towards. And what, if we know that, what do young athletes need on all these stages? So in Germany, we defined our performance requirements in a very simplified manner. This is the performance parameter. It's again a model. All models are wrong. I already said that. But it is easy to understand. The foundation of performance is and will always be the physical and mental health of an athlete, followed by his psychological and social skills. And moreover, the general physical qualities, they are just tickets for the sport-specific techniques, the technical and tactical skills. So give you an example, if your athlete is not healthy, or if he or she is not willing to train or to behave accordingly in a team environment, you will not be able to develop these general physical qualities. And if you don't develop these physical qualities, you will always be limited in technical skills. And if your repertoire of technical skills, throwing techniques, passing techniques, one-on-one techniques is limited, there's only few tactical options on the hand. And this is why it's very easy for us to break the concept down to these parameters and the general and more specific skills we need for performance. Again, a slide which is very much overloaded. I'm sorry for that. This is the master plan, the DHB Rahmentrainingskonzeption at one glance. So again, you see those 5 different stages, starting at the bottom with the fundamentals and ending here up at the top with the train to win. And we defined all in all 13 different areas in which we see development. 10 of these are training specific, and 3 are dedicated to health, personality, and also the performance environment. And this poster that you see, which is overloaded and only partly translated into English, I'm sorry for that. This poster is only covering the 10 training specific areas. As you can see, we have individual offense skills, individual defense skills, small group offense, small group defense, team defense, positional offense. For the goalkeepers, of course, goalkeeping, we have fast break, and we have the strengths and conditioning. And for every single stage, from fundamentals to train to win, we defined what an athlete should be able to perform. Very important, if you look on this massive slide, it is important to say that in reality, an athlete will not be always in the same stage in all these 10 categories. Just give you an example. There will be athletes that from a biological point of view are very progressed and very accelerated. They can probably train in strength and conditioning in the train to compete level, but their individual skills in offense and defense are still limited. So he can be in the train to chain level for individual handball skills while being on strength and conditioning in the next level already. So please keep that in mind. For the remaining presentation, I would like to focus on these physical qualities. But I'd like to invite every one of you to join the webinar of my colleague Jochen Beppler, who will go more into the technical and tactical details afterwards. So please join Jochen. Sorry for the advertisement. When talking about physical qualities, it's important to say that we are not developing strengths to become the best in weightlifting. So the development of physical qualities must always be seen in the context of handball specific movements and the transfer in techniques. And the typical movements, they are just simply running, jumping, throwing, and tackling. And these basic movements or techniques are on the one hand developed through strength and conditioning, of course, but also through handball training. And the goal is to increase the performance or to increase the regeneration level, to regenerate more quickly. And on the other hand, to reduce fatigue and to reduce injuries or the occurrence of injuries. So going back, having motion quality like stabilization, mobilization as the basic physical quality in mind. For us, the first step was to define the speed, strength, and endurance profile for handball in general. This is already, as you can see, very complex compared to other sports like weightlifting, where we have a clear focus on strength, or marathon, where we have a clear focus on endurance and metabolic capacities. This is already complex because we need to optimize all of these speed, strength, and endurance. And it becomes even more complex when we are talking at later stages of the long-term athlete development, when we're talking about different playing positions. So it becomes clear that a line player, for example, has more strength needs compared to a wing player. And we are not talking about the inter-individual variation within the playing position, which is what we have to deal with when we are entering the last stage of the long-term athlete development. So, as I said before, physical qualities only can serve to develop the handball-specific movements. So from a strength and conditioning point of view, we have defined 4 ultimate goals that are always the center of all of our training iterations. We want to maintain running performance and speed, and even win the last sprint after 60 minutes of game, after having run 6 kilometers or in the last game of a big tournament. We want to jump higher than our opponent. We want to optimize our throwing position and thereby, or on the other hand, worsen the throwing position of our opponent. We need to control and win offensive and defensive tackles, and we need to build resilient athletes that can tolerate hard body contact. And it's all about throwing harder and more precisely, even under opponent pressure. So these are our handball specific goals that we want to develop through strength and conditioning. So from a very, very general perspective that we have talked until now, let us become, which is a very sharp break in this presentation, let us become very, very specific. Let's look into a single case. This is the situation that Jochen Beppler will talk about later in his webinar. And what we see right now on high performance handball level, which is the most often strategical or tactical goal in handball. We want to isolate a single defender, here number 3, on an open space for a good one-on-one situation. And from a developmental perspective, the highlighted player here, this is a German player born 2006, and he is shortly after his growth spurt. So what should he be able to do in this specific situation? And there, the master plan is very helpful if you have this always in mind. And he says, or it says, that at this point of his development, he needs to have multiple variations of standing and jump shots to solve this situation. Depending on the positioning of the defense player, is he remaining more more defensively, then the stand and jump shot variations become important, or is he opening the space? So then he needs one-on-one breakthrough variations to the dominant and non-dominant side. And if the help is there, or if we are in the duel, he needs to pass under physical pressure. And of course, this decision needs to be made in quick time under pressure. So let's see, I've prepared a video how this player is acting right now during his stage of his development. So we see 6 times same scenario from a tactical point of view, isolation of number 3, defensive positioning and shot, offensive positioning and breakthrough to the dominant side, breakthrough to the non-dominant side, help from number 4 and passing under pressure, and quick decision making if things change rapidly. So this is our player like we see him right now at the moment. 6 different solutions for this player for the same tactical scenario. So we could be very satisfied for now. I think that were good scenes. I picked them accordingly. So there have also been not as worse scenes, of course, but I think there are good options. However, we need to ask ourselves, what is up next with this guy? And the challenge is that the better this player becomes, the more difficult it gets for us as coaches to do the next step. And again, a model, I think, again, a very good model, a useful one, from the motor learning area. This is the challenging point hypothesis by the valued colleagues from Gorgonoli and et al. And what you can see is at the beginning of a player career, you can reach easily development, or you have good a quick learning curve with low task difficulty. But what we've seen here is he is not a beginner. He is also not an immediate, he is a skilled athlete. So if you're going down here on his way to becoming an expert, we see if we want to improve him even more, the task has to be much more difficult. And on the highest level, we have to work very, very hard to improve our athletes 1 or 2%. So keeping that in mind, and again, our master plan can help us guiding to the next step. So what is the master plan, the Rahmentrainingskonzeption saying? Of course, he still needs to expand his technical and tactical skills repertoire. But most importantly, at this point of his career, he needs to adapt it to higher pressure. His future opponents will be much quicker, stronger, and we need to get him game ready for this next challenge. So in this stage, there is clearly a focus also on developing physical qualities, especially speed and agility and strength and power. And in handball training, the focus lies on decision-making under pressure. So this leads me to the last part of my presentations. Keep this player please in mind, to give you some practical insights into our daily work in the German Handball Federation. As I said, how do we know what is up next with this player? And this is where performance diagnostics becomes very, very relevant for us, as it helps us to, let's say, objectify the performance, see what are fields or areas where he has to improve, and what we need or how to determine the next individual targets for him. So during national team camp, we regularly test our players to monitor the development on the one hand, but also to define the next upcoming training interventions. So depending on her or his individual results, not all tests that are shown here need to be done over and over again, but it is kind of our toolbox from which we make our decisions. We do have like the 20-meter sprint and the 5, 10, and 5 change of direction tests. They cover the area of speed and agility. We do have the 30-15 intermittent fitness test of Martin Boucher for the aerobic and anaerobic capacity. We do have the jump progression for force development, squat jump, counter movement jump, and drop jump. And for power, we test the power clean, and we assess the force velocity profile of the under extremities and of the lower extremities. And just to give you an impression how the diagnostic, the performance diagnostic can look like during our national camps, I've prepared a short video for you. So first, the 20-meter sprint, measuring 5, 10, and 20-meter times, 3 attempts. And the 5, 10, 5 change of direction tests, 2 times to every side. We have the jump progression, normally starting with a squat jump, which is not seen here in the video, but here's the counter movement jump and the drop jump. Then we do a force velocity profile for the upper extremities. You see here a small sensor on the bar, which is measuring the velocity of the bar. And depending on the weight or load he is doing, we can see how the force velocity profile is changing. And we also do this for the lower extremities, starting with body weight, then with 30% load of his body weight, followed by 60%, and finally 80% jumps with loaded bars. Finally, the power clean. And of course, sometimes we fail, but this is what it is in reality. So we test the 3 repetition maximum of the power clean also for power capabilities. And finally, for aerobic and anaerobic capacity, we do the 30-15 intermittent fitness test, which probably most of you know. It's heart rate monitored so that we can use the V intermission, the velocity of the chest for planning our endurance training. So from these diagnostics over the past years, we do this regularly and for a long time. We know very exactly how an athlete should perform during all the stages of his long-term athlete development. What you see here are the tests that I've shown to you, and these are the normative values, what he has to reach throughout his whole athlete development pathway. Please keep in mind that this chart is only for boys playing backward. So we do have normative value also for the other playing position and of course for both genders. So keep in mind our plan was to define the next step for this player born 2006, shortly after his peak height velocity. So if we know this, it is all about a systematic training process over and over again. This is our daily routine, our job as coaches. We test, like we've seen, we set a goal for him, like power and reactive strength development. We choose or pick the right methods that are targeting our goal, like the power methods, like doing plyometrics. We choose exercises in the next step. This is where probably a lot of young and non-experienced coaches start first. It's all about the question, what is the best exercise? But there are 3 steps before: goal setting, defining the methods, and then exercises. And exercises can be changed in a minute, but the methods should remain the same. Finally, we define the training material available, and of course, it is a process. We need to retest and see if our program worked properly. So how does a strength and conditioning program look when we have a national team camp? We always have the same structure so that our athletes and our coaches, also the club coaches, get familiar with it over the time. We have a warm-up with mobilization, activation, potentiation, specialization. When it comes to strength training, we do only the first 2 parts, so mobilization and activation, because the plyometrics, ballistics, and power are already potentiation. And the specialization are the strength exercises. So first, warm up. Second, all exercises where we need to be regenerated and not fatigued, where we need to be quick. We don't want to have fatigue when it's all about speed. So here are typically Olympic lifts, loaded jumps, unloaded jumps, and medicine ball exercises. And then the core of our strength training is always 2 or 3 main lifts. And this is where the training method that we chose is very important. And as a last point, we have like assistant exercises. These are 3 to 5 exercises that are smaller variation of main lifts, or that target smaller muscle groups or individual needs. If someone has problems with his shoulder or with his knee stability, then we put in here the right exercises for his or her individual program. So coming back to our player, we want to make him more agile. He needs to have more speed, especially lateral speed. So we try to build a program, to design a program that focuses on his actual stage. So obviously we are in a good phase for hypertrophy still. This is why the repetitions in the mains are at around 8 repetitions. And we have a clear focus and power on lateral speed or change of direction. So we see and follow the same structure as presented earlier. We have the warm-up, the plyometrics, the power. We have the main part with the strength exercises, and we do have 3 assistance exercises for him. 2 days per week, 2 different full body programs. Very important to say that this in the gray line is not part of the strength training, but these drills are integrated into the handball training, into the final stage of warm-up. So this takes place on the pitch. And again, for those who are not familiar with all these different names of the exercises, I have prepared a small video so that you can see how this training program would look like. Keep in mind, this is dedicated to our player aged and born 2006 with a focus on lateral speed. We have the plyometrics in the beginning and the power exercise on day one, the power snatch. We do have a unilateral main lift, the Bulgarian split squat. We do have the bench press. We have some assistance, unilateral deadlifts. For the trunk stability, the landmine twist, which is very important for backcourt players. And for him, some individuals like mini band in and outs. And then in the gym, after a warm up, we do have the lateral progression because this is part of his development program. We need to have him improving in lateral speed. This could be one part of his warm-up program shortly before we start into the regular handball main program. Coming to the second day, again, lateral progression, lateral drop jumps in this case. We have the power exercise here with a loaded counter movement jump. We have as mains the hip thrust. The barbell rows. And again, 3 assistance exercises, the single leg squat, the single arm landmine thrust, again for shoulder and trunk stability, and the resistant and pullovers. Going back into the sports hall, the lateral progression, which would be again the end of the warm-up, and the second lateral progression with change of direction movements with and without signals. So this could be a typical program that we define on this specific point of time in the career of this young player. And that's it already from me. And I'd like to end like I started with a quote from a Greek philosopher I like very much. We don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. So it is up to us as young coaches to deliver the best training possible. And the best training with regards to long-term athlete development has a clear focus on long-term development rather than creating success very early in the short. And the best training is as individual as possible. And it considers the individual maturation and the skill competencies of every single player. So up to now, thank you so much for listening and joining the webinar. And I'm now open for our questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Very, very interesting, of course, to see the background of the German Federation and how they do things, or how do you do things. There are, of course, some questions, and I think I will go chronologically. In regards to height, you've mentioned something there. Does that mean that smaller, for example, center back player, because this is the question, does he or he doesn't have good chances to get into the German youth teams? How important is the height, and how important are the qualities of a player?
Of course, anthropometical measures are important for selecting players. So the likelihood of becoming a successful player in the national team, you probably need height. But regarding the center back, for example, we had a long-time strategy that we looked at the bigger ones, and we noticed that we missed those that are more creative, that have more playing abilities. So it's not all about height, but we need to know how height velocity is right now. So when we are selecting players, we need to show who we are. We need to be sure who we are selecting. So part of our selection is always the definition of the biological age, which is very important, so that we can see what kind of player is in front of us. Is he still developing, or has he already reached his peak height? This is important, rather than saying we pick the larger one for the backcourt. I think it's more a question about knowing who you are selecting at this point, and knowing also those who you don't select and at which point of their peak height velocity they are right now.
Of course, Germany is a powerhouse in handball, but Germany failed to get medals in the last competitions, big competitions at under 19 level. Does this mean that the model needs to be changed or upgraded? You need to upgrade the model anytime or see what the tendencies are or such?
No, definitely not. We failed probably in the under 19, as you said. But if you look at the under 21 men's, for example, and also the results from the other YAC teams, I think we are on a good way. And we have changed the system a couple of years ago, and we need to give a new concept time. And as I said, this process takes minimum 6 years. So if you're changing a concept, you cannot expect to have results without 1 year. That would be completely the wrong interpretation. So we don't decide to change everything just because of single results. And as I said, although we didn't reach the medals in the under 19 boys, this is not the target, because I don't care about the under 19 medals when we have 5 or 6 players in this group that can transfer to the men's team. So we need to do this with everything. Talking about success, this is too short-minded or too narrow-minded in my eyes. We need to see what potential is still there in the athlete. And so our target is to see if a boy or a girl, independently on which age category she is actually playing in the national team, can she be transferred into the women or man team? No matter how the results are, I know my colleagues, their jobs also depend, of course, on how they are performing, but we focus on the developmental pathway, not on the results. Sometimes results are good, then you have done a good job, but the job doesn't get worse because you're one place lower on the medal ranks.
Of course, players do not stay as much with the national team than with their clubs. Is it also a general strategic point of view in Germany that the clubs also follow?
Of course, the majority of the time, the players stay at the clubs. So we can only help our colleagues in the clubs to do the work and do it together with them. So all the recommendations also on strengths and conditioning need to be communicated precisely with our colleagues, because they are doing the work. And I need to say they do good work at their clubs. And we are strongly depending on this good work. So communication is always key when you're working in a national federation. And 95% of the time, the colleagues or the players stay at the clubs, of course. So the time we have to work with our athletes is always so small that we cannot say that our impact there is comparably big to what the clubs are doing. But we need to help the clubs and get them ready to do the right stuff at the right time.
Of course, we have attendees here from all over the world, and some of the questions are how to develop players to have a good career, to improve them when there are not so many, the handball is not so developed in those countries. What should be the main points to see and to follow to develop players in a better way and improve, of course, the handball in this way?
First of all, I would say focus on basics. I think the IOC consensus says it very good. You need to work sustainably. This is one thing I want to highlight. So, as I said earlier, don't change your plans too often. Decide a way and follow this path for a period of time. no matter if you're working in a big or a smaller federation. And easily we should focus on the basics of handball rather than following the high-end tactics that we see in international handball, because this is not a good thing to see if you want to develop players in smaller countries. This leads to a very tactic-driven education of players and not to a good basic individual skill acquisition in handball. So focus on basics, forget about all the tactics, do the individual stuff on strength and conditioning level and on handball level, and don't be driven by what you see on World Championships, European Championships, or Bundesliga.
We had a lot of questions in this regard. How early should the strength and conditioning part should be introduced into the youth players, children, and so on?
As early as possible, especially when it comes to strength. Strength, as the youth development model has also shown, is a good thing that you can start right early. I think it is just a question of how we deliver physical training to kids. This must be very playful, and especially in nowadays society, I think we have a lack of strength and education also, and physical education at schools, at least in the countries I know. So it would be good with all the digital environment to start very early. There's strong support of the science that physical training is not a problem when you start early. So see what the kids want to do. Of course, you don't do barbell lifting and maximum strength methods in young ages, but you could easily work in a playful environment with like sticks and doing the first basic movements very early. I'm having a 6-year-old at home, and if I switch off my digital background, I could easily show you my home gym. And my son follows me, so do others, and he starts with 6 and has fun doing basic lifts. So why don't we let them do? Just remember what kind of physical qualities we already need when they are jumping around on a playground. They need to land, which is very, very difficult from a physiological point of view. They need to jump. They do that very playfully. And what we do with them in the gym or in a playful environment does not come to that kind of difficulty at all. So start early, start playful, start with techniques rather than doing weights, and let them grow early, especially in nowadays society.
We have another question that was addressed in the previous webinars about the mental part of handball and the cognitive part of handball. How you've obviously showed us a lot of physical measurements and so on, but how important and what does Germany do from this point of view, from the mental point of view, helping players stay cool under the pressure, because that's also a very important part, because you said that handball is now very important in handball to take decisions under pressure.
That's a good point. I'm not a mental health specialist, so we do have mental health specialists. They care for the personality development, which is always difficult when it comes to adolescents. You know, they are not grown persons; they are not adults already, so they have much more difficulties in life than we do have as adults. And this needs to be considered. So what we do is we do also have a psychological diagnostics. And from there, we know what kind of types our players are and where they need support and what we can support within them. So same like with the physiological and physical capabilities, we also need to measure somehow the mental status of our athletes. I think the mental one is probably right at the beginning much more important, because I talked about dropout. A lot of kids drop out from our talent pool before they reach peak performance level. And this is an alert sign for us that this part of the long-term athlete development should also be considered. So we do similar diagnostics like we do also on the physical capabilities, and then have at least at national team level. I know national team level, we do have like a professional for mental health. That is always part of our stuff.
Patrick, thank you very much for the presentation and for the answers. Excellent insights into German handball and the development of youth in German handball. Of course, we will have another webinar at 15 CEST with Jochen Beppler, another German member of the German Federation and an IHF CCM lecturer. Until then, see you, and thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you to everyone out. Don't miss Jochen. I promise it will be really good.